Good Monday morning. I'm starting out today with one of my favorite people. So much favorite, Michel Bilodeau, who you're going to find really fascinating, spends every Tuesday afternoon, and every Tuesday afternoon I get great ideas from him and great insights in the world. He claims he's retired, but he spends so much time learning about things and doing things that, thank you for coming, Michel.
Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah.
Now, I know, as I warned you right at the start, I don't stick to the script really well.
Yeah.
You've been around me enough to know that I have trouble with that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I can confirm that statement, so yes.
If anybody could have a foil, Michel is my foil. Michel is someone who plans, understands everything, and takes really good care of making sure everything's tight. That's why I asked him to come and talk about planning.
I'll do my best.
Oh my God. The other thing, though, that Michel does, he's going to tell you that he's retired when I say, what do you do, Michel? And he's then going to say, he plays pickleball. Yes, he plays pickleball. That's how we met. But even his pickleball is methodic. So, Michel, what do you do?
Well, I've been retired officially from the corporate world, I'll call it that, for the last 3.5 years. But since retirement, I did take a little bit of time off for the first year, but after that, I guess I'm doing some part-time consulting here and there. So that makes it that Ross says I'm not retired. And then, of course, you mentioned the pickleball. I'm also involved with the pickleball club in the local community, which has been an interesting exercise to go through. So besides that, I'm trying to keep fit and trying to stay current on world events and technology and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Michel, you should never give me a leading line. You should never throw something at me.
Okay.
Because I know he's taken over trying to bring his corporate planning experience to a pickleball club. Who was it, the famous author who said sometimes managing and leading is like herding cats?
Fill me in on that.
Oh, yeah, I've got the book over here somewhere. But it is, and you must be finding that a bit dealing with these people who set up a club but don't plan.
Well, we're trying to apply some of that discipline, and to be fair, I mean, it's a new club, so, people from various backgrounds, and so of course, it's a bit of a journey, and it's a fast-growing sport, as you well know, and lots of emotions, in certain topics within the club. So anyway, we're trying to apply some level of discipline and planning in the process. It's a journey.
It's interesting, and I'll get to some of the comments that came in, but one of the most interesting things that I'm seeing is we're getting a lot of entrepreneurs involved with us. And what I'm getting back in his comment is, well, I don't need to plan. I don't have time to plan. I know where I'm going.
Yeah. I mean, my background, I mentioned earlier, I spent 34 years in the corporate world. And of course, there's a classic stereotype that maybe the corporate world does a little bit too much granular planning. But it's certainly been my experience managing different parts of the business that if you don't lay out what you're planning to do over the next year or over the next sequence of period, it could be 3 to 5 years, you have a chance that you're going to, be reactive to what's happening around you and not, follow the journey that you set yourself to go after. So I'm a big proponent of laying a plan and making sure that it's well communicated within the organization and that you break it up into piecemeals that are manageable.
Now, there is a similarity. As you know, I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
There is a similarity. Those that plan absolutely have a better focus, an idea of what their goals are.
Yeah.
In a corporate world, you know where you're going to go because it's going to meet a corporate strategy.
Yeah.
But here's the question. Invariably, and with our economy right now, which you and I love to talk about,
Yeah.
no plan is etched in stone. You write the plan, and with the way things are going, it can change the next day. What's your advice on dealing with planning, A, putting it down on paper, and B, dealing with change?
Yeah, so, there's a famous professor from McGill University that I'm a big fan of called Henry Mintzberg for individuals that are interested in the history of strategic planning and planning efforts. He wrote a great book a number of years ago called The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning. And I think the important part is that last section of the title of that book. He recognized, and many other authors recognize, that there's deficiencies in planning right off the start, because the best laid plan, as you just mentioned, can change. There's external factors. It can be, I mean, we're living through it right now, just from a political perspective and what's happening on a world economy and some of the policies that are unfolding and so on. So you do your best to lay out a plan, which is a very methodical process, but at the same time, that plan can change because of some of these disruptive elements. And you have to be nimble enough as an organization to recognize those patterns and then be able to pivot and make adjustments to your plan accordingly.
Interesting, back to corporate, because most people don't understand that what you get out of corporate is sophisticated training, sophisticated planning. But that can be brought down to be used in smaller organizations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as an entrepreneur, now I guess I can almost call you an entrepreneur now.
Why?
Well, you've all heard about our cave conversations here, I'm sure. And of all the facilitators I've had in that gets the most raving reviews, it's Michelle. Do you want to smile at that one? Okay. And they've all said to me, if we ever do it, will Michelle be there? Michelle has now helped me out on a couple of situations where he's actually gone in and helped people plan, understand where the boulders are, the rocks are, the things, and help them get over it. Do you want to tell them how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with, at its root, when you're trying to establish the direction of an organization, it's a lot of facilitation of ideas and inputs from various stakeholders. So at its root, I do a fair amount of facilitation, getting the input, like I said, from the stakeholders, but the stakeholders across the board. So from senior management to more frontline management, and making sure that that plan is representative at all levels. And then it's guiding, the enterprise as to, now you have something on paper that you've kind of isolated. What do you do with it? How do you manage it on an ongoing basis? And, back to the book that I mentioned earlier, historically, there's been many different types of strategic planning initiatives and methodologies and so on. And those are all fine and dandy, but part of the failure, the rise and fall of strategic planning, is that inherently in a planning process, very methodical, you also require a high level of creativity, of people thinking outside of the box and figuring out what that direction and so on is going to be, going forward. And when you do that combination and you manage it on a day-to-day basis, it's got to show up in a manifested way to the people in the organization. Too many times, and I'm sure some of you have gone through this, you go to a strategic retreat, or you have a 1 or 2 day session where you're pulling together the strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years, and then it's completed. And I can speak from experience, having witnessed this even in the corporate world, it kind of goes on a shelf. And so the idea is that it's not just the content of the plan that's important, that's for sure a big part of it. It's the context in which you manage that plan on an ongoing basis. And what do I mean by context? So it's back to things like communication, visibility of the plan from all stakeholders. It's not just a plan for senior management. It's meant to be ingrained into individuals' objectives, departmental objectives, division, objectives. But it's very real to people because they can touch it and feel it on a regular basis. It's not just something that got done a year ago and, oh yeah, that's right, we did that and we prioritized some things, and where is that? So I think that philosophy is true for corporate, small to medium size enterprises, entrepreneurs. It fits the bill. The one thing that I always provide as guidance, again, based on experience, is people get very creative, put lots of ideas, you shape it into some form of plan. When it's time for execution, you gotta now decide what portions of that plan you're gonna work on the short term.
You can't do everything at one time.
Well, many organizations try to do, and exactly. So I'm a big believer in no more than 5 to 7 key initiatives, key success factors, KSF, one of the terms that's used at any point in time. And when I've done some of the work that you've mentioned, I've helped to guide the teams as to the selection, if you want, of those 5 to 7 key initiatives so that they can get really focused and then check those off and then move on to the next phase after that.
I agree with you. I tell people, pick 5, make 3 your primary, and then when you knock 1, 2, or 3 off, you take the next one and move it up and fill up the ball.
Yeah.
And that gives you a little bit of creep also. It gives you success. People start to see.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And you get this sense of, accomplishment as an organization, because if it's a plan that is constantly revolving and you never see a sense of, achieving the milestones, that can be a little depressing in the organization. So checking off the things that have been done and celebrating, communicating those, making them highly visible to, again, a broad cross-section of the organization, then just makes the planning process less of this classic corporate and paper, if you want, exercise and intellectual exercise, but starts socializing it, within the organization so everybody touches it.
You've hit something that's really, really important. We've both seen it from our corporate experience and from my entrepreneurial side. A lot of people write a plan, right?
Yeah.
But then you're right, they don't communicate it.
Yeah.
How does a leader go about communicating the plan to his troops?
Yeah. Yeah. So it really, in that scenario, it starts at the top, and it starts at the top of the top. Okay.
Yep.
So again, in companies, you can have a subgroup that has worked out, it could be a division. They've worked out what they're going to be working on for the next year or a few years, but they may have left out communicating that or involving senior management above them. So it does start at the top. The top has to, in some form or fashion, demonstrate that they understand the plan and that they're supportive of that plan. They don't have to be the ones to manage it and, execute it on a regular basis, but they have to be visible in that picture. And then from there, if you're a division or if you're, the lead manager driving it, it's really about embedding it into your hopefully existing processes in the organization. So firm departmental objectives. It's as simple as you set up objectives for your staff, on a quarterly, on an annual basis, and that's how you measure their performance and so on. And the staff member can look at the things that they're working on and relate it back to the overarching theme of what was decided. And that's something that many organizations fail to do, from incorporating that element into the execution of the plan. And I've done some research on this, and it's one of the elements that has led to this rise and fall, if you want, back to the book, the fall of strategic planning, because again, it's not embedded within people's world on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, they don't see it, they don't touch it and feel it on a day-to-day basis. That's the key, is to making sure that they have visibility and it's real to them. So that's when you get buy-in.
Now, are you ready for this one? Mm-hmm. This is coming from left field.
Okay.
Left field, over there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. How many of you folks have ever got a package from Amazon, the paper package? How many of you? Most of us, right? Michelle, when he was working with Henkel, right? Go ahead, tell them the rest of the story.
My goodness, yeah.
Because this is innovation.
Yeah. There's many layers to this story, but the Henkel, which I worked for over 20 years.
Maybe you better give people who Henkel is.
So Henkel is the largest adhesive company in the world. They're part of an overall larger company that some of you as consumers may have purchased more of their, not the adhesive side, but their consumer brands like Persil and Purex and other
Loctite.
Detergents. Yeah, and then on the adhesive side is Loctite and Technomelt and a whole bunch of different products. And they're an over $11 billion organization. We had a division, which I led, that was working to figure out how to incorporate some of our adhesive technology, but adhesive technology that expanded into whatever purpose out there. Simultaneously, and this is going back to 2014, 2015, simultaneously you had this massive emergence of e-commerce and players like Amazon that were struggling with this issue of what they call, not I, but they call consumer shame. So consumer shame at the end of the week, you've ordered all this stuff and now it's time to put it into a bin or into a garbage can, and you realize that the boxes you can cut and put into recycling, but the mailers, that you were receiving in the past, which in the past was mostly a paper and bubble wrap on the inside, those ones you had to put into the garbage because they were non-recyclable. So anyway, my team worked with Amazon to use the concept of what we had of this expandable adhesive and create a proxy version to the bubble, if you want, or the cushion resistance capability, but all within a framework that the final design of that mailer would be paper, the interface of the adhesive slash bubbles, and then paper on the inside. So, and for any consumer now, if you order from Amazon, you will see a nice big recycling logo that has been there for a number of years now. And our team helped to develop that in conjunction with Amazon.
Innovation is doing something better than it's ever been done before. This is a good case of it. But for entrepreneurs, here's something that's important. You've got to give people, and I'm going to come to you in a second, even in corporate life, time to develop it. When you look at companies like 3M, Black & Decker, you start to see even HP. They have grown because of innovation. As a corporate leader, and you were, how do you foster that idea with your people that says, come to me?
With the internal or external?
Yeah, internal.
Internal. Yeah, I mean, there's some organizations' DNA is just shaped that way. I mean, I was fortunate enough that with Henkel, it's an organization that's going to celebrate 150 years of existence, next year. There's not too many organizations that have that kind of longevity. And the reason they've been around that long is because it's part of their DNA to focus on innovation. They have very robust processes to drive that, to manage it on a regular basis. And the people you hire, so, the mindset of the individuals, they're constantly looking at ways to either use existing or new formulas on new applications and new, end products and end markets. So a little bit cultural, I'd say.
That culture in place, I guess, is what I'm asking. Even an entrepreneur has to do it.
Yeah. I mean, people have to get excited, by it. So it's back to a little bit of the vision, back to the planning, process is, you, in simple terms, strategic planning is often associated with what's going to be my revenue growth in the upcoming years, right? I mean, that's been the typical, back to the 1950s, early versions of strategic planning. It was all about financials. And there's truth to that. I mean, you do it because you're trying to drive some growth within your organization. So I think generally speaking, employees know that growth means there's going to be more opportunities for them and for the organization. Hopefully, we're good. Hopefully, bigger things for them personally, but bigger things for the organization as a whole. So frontline managers have to be passionate about it. They have to talk about it. I mean, you can't lose sight of the day in, day out of the work that needs to be done, but you have to take some time, as an organization to focus on that portion. And, back to the corporate world, I mean, there's some corporations that will dedicate certain individuals' times, 20, 30% of their time on pure innovation searching or innovation work. I mean, it's prescribed in their job description. I don't know that works within the entrepreneurial or small to medium-sized enterprise. It could with certain functions.
It does.
With certain functions. So it's really shaping it that you're sending a message that innovation is a key part of your driving in the organization. And then, of course, when you have some wins, make sure you communicate it again and celebrate it so that people get...
And that reinforces your plan.
Yeah, it reinforces the plan and reinforces the culture of innovation.
What most people don't know is Michelle and I both worked at different points in our career for a very large oil company. That oil company doesn't exist in Canada any longer. It got bought out. One of the things we both found, and I in particular, was that the middle management team, remember what Machiavelli said to the prince, beware the nobles, they've got the most to lose with change? And we both saw that there, that people were guarding their lifestyle. How do you overcome that in a corporate, to start off with, environment, to overcome those people who can block a project? A leader may say yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's It's a tricky portion. If you have, you're always going to have this. You're going to have a range of, if you want, buyers,
Yes.
that they buy into the philosophy, and through proper communication, proper visibility of where you're heading, the plan and so on. You hope that they'll get on board, and often you may have to pull those individuals and have, very separate chats with them because they need a little bit more convincing,
Their nudging has to be stronger.
Yeah. But, I've also faced situations in my career where you just won't move those people off center. So, the classic after that is they either are going to be moving on to different roles within the organization if they're so much part of the innovation cycle and they don't buy into it, or they'll find a better opportunity somewhere else. Yeah.
So I've got one for you. When you were a corporate individual, I suppose you spent every single hour in your office. Or did you do, like I suspect, a lot of what they call MBWA, management by walking around and talking to people?
So the latter. I actually track my footsteps, sadly, on a daily basis to see how much I was doing of that walkabout within the organization. But it's not just within the organization. It's getting out there in front of customers. So that's really, ultimately that's going to be your test. We talked about the Amazon, project. My team was there regularly, but I was in Seattle on a regular basis also. I was intimate with some of the details. We had a very strong project management group within the organization to manage the innovation from start, to finish or to commercialization. And within that group, as a leader, you can sit and just watch, or you can be actively involved. And I was co-chair of those initiatives because they were sizable enough and important enough. And that, again, sends a message. It's the classic lead by example, that you're vested into it, you're getting into the details without micromanaging, but you're showing an interest and you're trying to understand, and then the team rallies behind that and says, okay, it's important to him, it's important to us, so we're on a good path.
John le Carre, the famous author, said, it's a very bad world when you sit behind a desk to manage it.
Yes.
But one of the most interesting things, and I'm going to throw it at you, is when you do leadership by walking around or management by walking around, you gather what they call in the spy business human intelligence.
Yeah.
Data will tell you all sorts of things, but until you find out the qualitative stuff, you can't put the quantitative in place.
Yeah.
Until you find out why people want it, you can't write the plan.
Right.
So how would you go about, even in corporate and entrepreneurial life, doing that research?
Yeah, it's a bit, you got to triangulate from, different, parts of call it the ecosystem, but your environment that you're dealing with. You've got, ultimately your product's going to hit a customer base that I talked about. So you gotta be in touch with the customers. If it's not you personally, your team has to be in touch with the customers and what's happening. You got to be in touch with the various stakeholders / departments that are going to help to execute this. Projects can fail if you don't engage. For example, you're on a journey and you're going to be launching this thing, but it requires a whole bunch of raw materials that you didn't purchase before, and you never involve purchasing into the early stages. And so all of a sudden you're delayed because you forgot to involve the right. So mapping that out, and I'm a big proponent of professional project managers that their sole job is to figure out that landscape and figure out who needs to be involved and touching base with them and engaging them in the right process at the right time in the process. But ultimately that innovation management, if you want, has to get input from the customers, but from the people that are working it, and you can do that in different ways. So if you're launching a whole bunch of innovations, or you're sharing a plan with a group and you're telling them where you're heading and you're communicating that, and I used to use town halls quite a bit, then the feedback from those town halls, unfortunately, many organizations do town halls, but they don't actually do.
They're spray and praise.
Yeah, they don't circle back to figure out, did the message that they were trying to share resonate? So, one way to get around that is that you actually do, right after the town hall, a survey with whoever presented their ideas, and asking the people that attended, what did they hear? What resonated? You can rank it. And that was a discipline that when I led organizations was ingrained. Every quarter I would do a town hall. There was a survey post town hall. That survey, I would share the results of that survey at the next town hall. Whatever had emerged as fairly consistent input on a certain topic. If we had a gap, we addressed it. So they saw that the feedback loop was not just lost.
That's marketing.
It is. I mean, it's marketing, it's
selling.
Communication, it's selling, but it's engagement. It's just making sure that, everybody, again, back to they understand the plan, you're executing, you're reporting on it, you're sharing it through a town hall forum. But the people that are working it day in and day out, they may have a different opinion as to how it's actually happening out there. And so if you give them a forum to be able to share that opinion and you listen to it and you react and adjust accordingly to whatever, then that's a nice, circular loop.
I'm going to put a little commercial in here for me. If you go and get a copy of my book on Amazon called Ideas to Profits, there's a whole section on innovation in it. And one of my favorite ones is David Packard, when he turned Hewlett-Packard around.
Yeah.
And what does everybody? It also talks about 3M and how they do it. But here's something that is critical, and you brought it up briefly. What are the attributes, 3 to 5 attributes of a good project manager? Because quite often, somebody can own a business, run a business, or be a leader, but they can't manage a project to save their life.
Yeah.
What are the attributes that you look for in a project manager?
Yeah, so there's a few layers to that. There's the platform that you use to project manage. So that can be in the form of software, but picking the right tool that works, for the organization. And then it's about the individuals. And I hate to stereotype, but all project managers that I work with were, a little bit on the side. I mean, they were detail oriented.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just, they were passionate about checking every box. And it wasn't because they were trying to create work. They just knew that those boxes were important in the process. So having individuals that are really good at identifying, what needs to be done to the sub level, and then taking the time not just to report back or tell people, here's what you need to do, but being engaged in the process, going to the purchasing department and having a discussion, not just telling them you need to do this, but having a discussion.
Buying them in.
Yeah, buying them in and selling them, here's why we need it by this time. Here's the broader project, here's the Amazon, project. So they themselves as employee/consumer can relate to the final product and say, okay, I got it. This is an interesting project that even hits home from a recyclability in the case of Amazon. So those project managers, their own communication style and ability to express the overarching, nature of the project is also a key factor that I've found the successful ones do that very well. So, yeah.
When you pick someone to lead a project, you'll always look for someone who has done it before, or do you look for somebody that you're looking to advance, and this is a good way to find out whether they can cut the mustard, as they say?
Yeah, I was privileged enough that those groups were sizable enough within the organization. So for us, it was always a mix.
Right.
We had identified project managers that were, call it Jedis, if you want, of project management. They were there for the major projects, but they were also there as the trainers for the individuals that wanted to do, in some cases, we used it as a rotation job function for high-performing individuals, because as a project manager, especially when it touches different parts of the organization, it's a great stepping ground to understand how the whole pieces come together. And so they would do that work for a couple of years and then move on to the next role. But we did have a core group that they were permanent. I mean, they could have other jobs if they wanted to, but their passion and years was project management.
I've had a couple of clients where they've had engineers and all they want to do is engineer the project.
They love it, yes.
Now, speaking of engineers, you've had an interesting history. You're a mechanical engineer. You were going to do aircraft.
Yeah.
And now you wound up sticking parts together.
Yeah.
And leading teams and going out and doing, I think you used to go to Formula One races. And the Masters and doing all sorts of customer-facing things.
Yes.
How does a young engineer, we've got a number of them on here, move from being stereotyped as the engineer who sits in front of the computer or to moving out. How did you go about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, my first role was in application engineering. That title within the Henkel, at the time, Loctite world, meant that you were helping salespeople and marketing people out in the field with customers. Yeah. So you touch the customers. And I realized early on within that organization that if I wanted to progress within the organization, I likely would have to take on some commercial role at some point or another. So going into sales. So there was a few stepping grounds for me to get there, but I realized as an application engineer and often as an engineer, when you walk in front of a customer and you're having conversations, you're often, and I hate to say it because I live both worlds, you're often more credible than the salesperson.
Yes.
Okay? Just because they buy into your background. You don't have a commission, is being tied to, what you're saying and so on.
You're there to help them get better.
And in fact, I would joke that some customers, when I moved on to sales, they wanted me to bring my application engineer for those conversations. And I'd say, but I was that a week ago. So how come you want? So that's a little bit of the backdrop. So, but for me, I realized that, the organization and when I graduated and I had done behind the counter sales roles through summer jobs. And
really, I didn't know that.
If you had asked me when I graduated from McGill, if I was ever going to go into sales, I would have told you categorically no. But what I realized is going into the real world is that the sales type of role that I was doing was actually an engineering sales role.
Yeah.
And so my technical background was highly complementary to the sales, process. And then over time, I always had a passion for management. And then I pursued my master's, as you know, at University of Waterloo in management science. So that kind of led to me heading into general management and management principles, which when you sit back and you think about it, in management, all you leaders out there, you're solving problems every day, which is what an engineer is trained to do through their education. So it's a natural fit. And, for those, passionate historians of back to strategic planning, if you go back to the roots of all the founders of the Bains and McKenzie's, the large consulting firms that were huge into strategic planning initiatives, those founders are, in many cases, engineers. That's their background. Because you're taking all these things that you have to do within an organization, and now you got to figure out how do you go about putting it together. And that's engineering.
I've got an interesting question, though.
Yeah.
When you were at engineering at McGill, they taught you that you had to be risk adverse. Everything you engineered had to be safe.
Yeah.
But in doing management and leadership, sometimes you have to take risk. And that's where the plan comes in, isn't it? That's where you start to figure out what a calculated risk is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not going to always have everything figured out. I mean, that's the whole notion of planning is you do your best to try to figure it out, but you're really setting up what that final goal is, but how you're going to get there is going to take twists and turns along the way. And so that's back to pure engineering. Those twists and turns are what you're often well trained to deal with, because it's a new problem, it's an adjustment that you have to deal with, and so you're geared towards trying to resolve it as a result of your training.
The steps that you put in place to deliver, the tactics that you put in place to deliver your strategic plan may change.
Very much.
But the plan, the objective always stays the same. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does, unless there's some massive disruption, that's happening in either that division or that space that you're working on. And there's rule number 6. You state that there's companies that missed out on that, change, that major disruption. So
Kodak and
exactly. So you try to hold steady to the ultimate goal. But how you get there, again, you do your best to plan for it. And then if there's a disruption or an adjustment that you need to make, you have to do a pivot. And you have to do it, the old saying, fail quickly. So, figure it out, see that it's coming, don't ignore it, and then adjust, accordingly.
As being in the computer industry, and initial Apple software was Xerox software, the initial mouse. He looked and saw what people were doing, and he brought it But let me ask you, because I don't want to take up all your time, and I could chat with you, as you know, it's 2 hours every Tuesday. If you really want to, call me. Maybe we'll invite you to come in and sit and chat with us. But from your experience, and you're not quite as old as me, you know, you've still got a long way to go in the consulting side. What three pieces of advice would you give people right now? Because A, our economy is changing. We don't know what's going on. We've gone from, we used to just call COVID a black swan event, and there were a few black swan events and gray swan events. But now with the current state of the world, we've got a whole ton of black swan events coming at us.
Yeah.
$100 billion coming out of Europe going to Ukraine is going to definitely affect that European marketplaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, question, three pieces of advice to people right now that they need to keep in mind as our world is evolving.
Yeah, so, I mean, staying within the context of planning,
Yes.
I don't think that changes. I mean, you still have to pull together what your plan is going to be, but it's back to what we said earlier. The world, and this is not new, we always think that change is happening faster now than it did 20 years ago.
Yep.
People 20 years ago would tell you change was happening just as fast back then.
Yep.
So we're just maybe more
Better
attuned to it because, you know, because of social media and the news and access to the news, you're seeing it live, real time, so much faster now. So, but, you know, from an advice perspective, as what I said, you know, we chatted about earlier, is keep your ear to the ground as to how those changes impact or could impact your organization.
Because there's always signals.
There's going to be signals, and if you're not paying attention to those signals, you're going to miss out on it. So having semi-regular review of those headlines, and, you know, of course, the big buzz one is AI, you know, for the last few years. So asking the question, does AI actually affect my organization in any way? Or can it help my organization in certain departments? But ignoring it and continuing on, you may end up getting beat out by competition because they actually leverage the technology themselves. So that's just one example that's, you know, again, is so prolific these days. You know, you can give many examples of how certain functions in orgs may actually be gone in 5 years, 10 years from now. So you got to deal with it. You can't ignore it. You can't put your proverbial head in the sand and not you know, listen to those signals.
So you got to get out and look for the smoke signals, so to speak. Look and see where the fires are burning.
Yeah, and then back to you know, even with all those changes that are taking place, you still have to focus. You still have to figure out your top 3, 5, 7, you know, things that you're working on, and having the discipline to execute on them, and then celebrating them and showing that it's ingrained within, you know, the organization, and then moving on to the next steps. You know, back to the book that I mentioned earlier, you know, Mintzberg had a few fallacies in his book, one of which is the fallacy of predetermination. And he's basically conveying the fact that as an organization, as leaders, trying to predict everything that's going to happen and put it into a plan, it's impossible. That's why it's a fallacy. So he recognizes that in the book, but then he gives you clues as to how you deal with it. And one of which is the ear to the ground, the ability of some departments to have dedicated time to just focus on that, so that they're not just thinking about the present and work, which is super important, but also figure out what are some of the disruptions that might affect us and how do we deal with it.
I've had a ball. I mean, I really enjoy any time I get to talk to this guy. Do you have any final comments?
Final comments.
I'm looking for a sage piece of advice, something that the font of wisdom would come out with.
Yeah, I mean, related to this theme, what I would say, and this is from personal experience, is writing or typing things down, and whether it's for an organization or personally, you know, so setting goals for yourself, and setting goals that could be 5, 10, 20, 30 years out. The old, you know, analogy or saying that says, you know, it's a self-fulfilling, you know, prophecy. My experience is it has been. And never underestimate the power of putting it down on paper or typing it out and re-looking at it on a periodic basis. It's amazing things that you thought, okay, this is going to be a stretch, but I'll put it down anyway.
Yep.
And then you look at it 5 years later and you say, son of a gun, we
I
got
did it.
there. We got there. So making sure that, you actually take that step, that reflection, laying it out, putting ambitious, but achievable, but leaning on the ambitious. And again, you'll see that, a lot of that.
A couple of things that might be helpful to you, our listeners, is, as you know, we've got 2 books out, Ideas to Profits, which is filled full of all tools. You've read it. And one called Weasels Always Win If You Let Them. Okay, but there's one main treatise in both books, and that's you got to plan.
Yeah.
You got to research. You got to understand what's out in front of you and how you're going to deal with it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So thank you, Michelle. This has been a
It's been fun. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.